The podcast represent for the youths them. Have a right so we share for reviews them. Have a mind and a voice so we use them. Tell me why them a try confuse them. And we a spread unity, spread love in your community. And that's just who we be. Yet still we face scrutiny. Make a choice, use your voice, share your thoughts on human rights. Make a choice, use your voice, share your thoughts on human.
Welcome Jamaica, and greetings to you from wherever you're watching. Welcome to episode 1 of the Justy podcast being hosted by Jamaicans for Justice. And today we'll be talking about knowing your rights. Now, I'm Dashawn Carter, and with me today I have
Kayla Wright
and Michaela Douglas.
And we're going to get into a hopefully candid conversation about rights, about human rights, knowing your rights, about remedying any breaches of human rights, and hopefully we'll be discussing quite a lot today.
Right, so first off, let's start by saying, have you ever been in a situation where you say, can this really be done? Are you supposed to do this?
Mm-hmm.
As Jamaicans and citizens, that we basically have a lot of in breach of our rights, and today we're focusing on where our rights come from and what are the limitations to those rights.
I feel like even like before we even go into this conversation, we have to discuss what are human rights, or what are rights in general, because I feel like a lot of persons see it as this like mystical concept. We hear it every day, but we never really give much thought to what a right is.
Yeah.
So, like, Kayla, in your own words, like, what is even a right?
So when people think of human rights, what should immediately come to mind is the human aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
There are entitlements and freedoms that we have just because we're human beings.
Mhm.
From we're born till we're dead, we have human rights, and no one can take those away from us at all. So that's the starting point, understanding that it's something that we have that no one can take away from us. And what is enshrined in, I guess we'll get into it, like the Constitution, different instruments can vary from country to country, but there are universal human rights that all of us have.
Yeah.
So, like, universality is one thing that you
Yeah.
touched on. Like, those are like one key characteristic,
Mhm.
and I guess also just being inalienable, or
Yeah.
like you can't take away someone's human rights, or they're inherent to you by
Yeah.
virtue of you being a human being.
Yeah.
Okay, I think those are two important things that, like, if anybody is supposed to ask what is a human right, you have to mention
Yeah.
those two key aspects.
Yeah.
And
for
then I think,
sure.
of course, it has to go into where do we even get these rights from.
Yeah.
So, like, we know that they're inherent, but what says that they're inherent? What gives us these rights? What lists them out, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what gives all these rights is for Jamaicans, we have the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom, and that basically is a legislative framework that basically mandates the type of rights that are subjected to us. There are limitations, however, so just because we have these rights, it doesn't mean that one should go and commit a crime and expect that, for example, take another life and expect that, okay, I will have my freedom still. So there are limitations to those rights. So, yeah.
So there are limitations.
Yeah.
And I think I like how you described it as like a framework, because yes, we have the Constitution, we know that's the big C, the main framework giving us these rights. But I think it also, like, I think there are other international treaties and international human rights legislation that gives us these rights as well. Because even our Constitution sort of is predated by some universal international human rights treaties, like I think it's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yeah, that sort of preceded our constitutions, especially because we would have gotten our constitutions a bit later, around 1962, when we came independent, and that came after the UN Charter. Yeah.
And it's just since 2011 we got our charter.
Our charter.
So, as the charter exists right now in section 3 of our constitution, what it did was replace existing rights that were there. So it's not as our constitution didn't have rights in it, but this was more, or was seen, the 2011 amendment is seen as a better representation of where we are as a society
Mhm.
and the rights that we have. So now we have rights under our charter, right to life, to liberty, freedom of movement, freedom of opinion, freedom of religion, all those things that are seen as relevant to the time that we live in, as opposed to rights that we did have in our independence constitution.
So like different generations, like first generation, second generation, like an evolution of how our rights are reflected in legislation. Okay, so that's cool. And you began like mentioning, I guess, some of the rights that are listed out in the Constitution. So freedom of movement, right to life, right to religion, right to expression, freedom from discrimination. I feel like
right
those
to
are
a
some of
healthy
the popular
environment,
ones.
adequate standard of living, right to education,
Right to privacy as well.
information,
Due process. And beyond just like listing those out, I think it also is important to understand that the Constitution, while giving us these rights, they also tell us how to go about protecting those rights. And it sort of also gives us some responsibilities when it comes down to rights. Because we always hear that with rights come responsibilities. And I think, as you would have mentioned earlier, yes, we have those rights, but there are certain situations in which there are justifications for curtailing some of those rights. Yeah. So what are, let's say, some of those situations where rights can be curtailed, but also like what are some of the responsibilities, I guess, that come with the rights that we have?
Yes, there are certain situations in which these rights are limited, and for example, we have persons being incarcerated due to the fact that they have committed some offense. For example, murder. You can't murder a man and get convicted and expect to be placed somewhere outside and have your freedom.
Yeah, you can't just be walking the streets having murdered somebody.
With no justifiable explanation. You can't be doing that. That you basically infringe on a man's right. You have to get someone have to happen to you. For example, now you have the right to movement. We do have right to movement, but there are instances in which it's restricted. For example, look at COVID-19. Look at COVID-19. Our right to movement was limited. Sometimes we have curfew. And
you're outside and you're not going. But because for the greater good, like for health reasons, those curfews were imposed for that specific reason. So even though we have the right to freedom of movement, that right would have been restricted for the greater good.
Yeah. So I think that's like even in the Constitution where it's like, okay, yes, you have these rights, and yes, you can limit rights. And you being the government in this instance, the government can restrict certain rights, but it has to be for, I guess, the greater good.
Yes, because we have to recognize that your right ends where another person's right begins.
I love what you said.
Yes, so if you realize that you exercise a right and you reach to the limit where it's going to breach another person's right, then you will have to think to yourself, say to yourself, no, I think this is a limit and I need to stop, because at the end of the day, you will be the one facing the consequences for your action.
And I think that's a good segue into looking at breaches of rights. And so we have these protections, and yes, they guarantee us certain freedoms and certain entitlements, but there are a lot of instances where those freedoms and those protections are breached. Where somebody does something, whether it's a state, whether it's police, whether it's even for children, your teachers, wherever you are, there are many instances where your rights are breached.
And you have to think about our role to play in that as well. Like, if we're the person infringed on the right, what does that mean for us? If we are the victim, what does that mean for us and the options that we have? Because it's one thing to say that, yes, I have the rights, and you breach it, but where do I go from there? You know, what do we do after that? And I think as young people, there's that disconnect with what options are available to us when the rights that we do definitely have are breached. So going back to what we were talking about before, about the Constitution and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, it doesn't just list out the rights that we do have, it shows us what we do when those rights are breached. And one of the main ways that we can get redress or remedy for those breached rights is bringing it to court. If we feel that our rights have been infringed upon, they've been breached, we have the right to redress as well. That's our right to bring it to court for due process, because outlines where we go, who we can call upon, when we feel our rights are being infringed.
Exactly. And when you look at that, there is something that many persons will say. The rights are being infringed, and you hear many of them say it's being infringed, yes, but me can't help it. Me can't afford it. Me can't afford to get an appropriate lawyer or a lawyer will actually have experience to assist me. Well, you also have a right to legal aid.
Yes.
You have a right to get adequate representation to defend yourself in court. So that's also another right. So for persons who believe that my rights are gonna just be infringed and through me cannot have the money, me I go suffer.
Yeah.
Please know that you have a right to legal aid. You can go and get help.
And I think even JFJ
Yeah.
and many other civil society organizations
Yeah.
can help out because they do understand that there are quite a few barriers for persons realizing and getting justice when their rights are breached. So you have organizations like JFJ that provide help or services on how to access the courts, how to identify when your rights as an individual have been breached, and what you can do from there. So civil society plays a really important role in not just helping us understand what rights are, but also protecting our rights. So like the keepers of the Constitution in a way.
So yes, we know that there are ways that we can seek remedies if we feel like our human rights have been breached. We know we can go to court. We know we can lean on JFJ and other civil society organizations who are equipped with the knowledge to help persons who are victims of human rights breaches. But then you must say, I wonder, all right, this happened to me, I go court, what even changes? Because my right was still breached. And there are different instances where the court will
fashion a remedy.
Yeah, will fashion a remedy for you. So it's either there's what's called like injunction, so they have to stop what they're doing if that's breaching your rights. Or you can even get damages like compensation. Or in very common cases like discrimination breaches and you lose your work because of discrimination. Let's say you're living with HIV, right? Your right to freedom from discrimination has been breached. You go to the court. You can be reinstated in your job.
Yeah.
Because of that breach, right? And the court is saying, no, and I say work.
Yes.
This was a breach of this person's human rights. Get them back at work. That happens. But then you think about if them even want to go back in that type of environment as well. But those are remedies that you can get from going to court.
So the Constitution gives courts this sort of flexible power to create remedies. Because when you look at it, let's say the breach is either it has happened in the past or it can either be continuous.
breach.
So like if it has happened in the past, you can't then go back in the past and tell someone to stop doing what they're doing. So that's where like damages and the money and the payout from the court will come in. But if it's something that's continuous, that's where you can get like your injunction to say, okay, this is a breach of somebody's rights, you have to stop this, or a declaratory order to say, okay, this is a breach, and other remedies that the courts see fit. And so I think we also have to mention things like due process, because when, let's say, you are being arrested or you're being charged with an offense, it's not just however the police feels, or it doesn't just go in any way. There's certain processes that the courts, that the Constitution outlines, that your charge or that your arrest has to follow. So I think we mentioned accessing an attorney, and for a lot of people, like, oh, I can't afford an attorney, and so I just can't challenge this in the courts. But you do have a right to an attorney, and in many cases you can access a public attorney. And even, let's say, knowing about why you're being arrested, that's something that has to happen.
Even though the language in which you're being told why you're being arrested and the charge that you have, it has to be done in a way that is understandable to you as well. But that will make it spicy.
Yeah. So we have a scenario. For example, a man driving markets on the road, and you know a thing about markets, the stigma around markets, right? Alright, and so I'm driving markets at a high speed. I come down the line, police pull him over and say, officer. Alright, anyway, just move on. Police pull him over and he say, officer, what go on? And the officer said to him, say, come out of the car. Me I go search it. When the officer go in there, the officer not see nothing.
But because in the now face the officer, the officer arrest him and say, me arrest you for assaulting a police officer or something. As citizens of Jamaica, can we, on the face of everything, spot any form of breach right there? So,
So it really just seems that he stopped the man just
Right.
because and make up a charge.
right. So as Jamaicans, we have to learn, say, there are certain situations that happen to us, and if we don't know our rights, we're gonna face a lot of suffrage and a lot of hardship. So, what's your opinion on that scenario, Kayla? What could he do?
So I feel like even in that situation, as you said, because it's also so normal in our society as well, we don't even realize when a breach is even happening.
Exactly.
You just take it as, yes, my driver markets, yes, me did a speed, yes, a police officer so him can search my car, can't do nothing about it. But even that in and of itself is a breach because searching the car without the reasonable suspicion or the warrant, a search warrant, and communicating that to the driver, that is a breach in and of itself.
Right.
And then
Arresting the officer simply because he may have said something in a different tone. Arresting the
That's also an abuse
person,
of
yeah,
power
that's
too.
abuse of power. Arresting the person simply because they use a tone. That's basically harsh and abuse of power, as Kayla had said. You can't be someone that your duty is to serve or protect.
yeah.
And instead of serving and protecting, you're actually oppressing the citizens. And then the citizens who are not in par with their right sometimes can't exercise their right.
Yeah. Because I don't even know the right has been breached.
Yeah.
And
So
I
then
think-
you sit down and stay
Take
on
it,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
take it.
I think it also highlights the idea of nobody being above the law, and so that there is actually a rule of law. So as, let's say, a constable pulling over somebody just because you have this authority, and you do have the power to stop somebody and perhaps give a search if there's a reasonable reason for you to do so, but you have to follow the procedures that give you the power. You have to follow the procedures that are outlined for arresting and charging somebody. And so, of course, if you don't follow those procedures, then you'll be breaching somebody's rights. So if your rights are being breached, of course, you have the court systems, you have the Supreme Court, which you would go to address this breach of your right. And of course, if it doesn't work out for you in your favor at the Supreme Court level, you can bring it to a higher court. And I think the main issue that we have with young persons and recognizing their rights is that they're not familiar with these institutions that are there to protect them. And because of this unfamiliarity, because of this knowledge gap, young persons are sort of more likely to be affected by breaches of rights. So if you're not knowledgeable, you're not empowered.
Yeah.
And so I think as civil society organizations like JFJ, our mandate and our responsibility really is to ensure that young people are in the know and that this isn't a secret, this isn't just something where it just stays online.
Like this is your birthright.
Like it's something that you ought to know about. Yeah.
Yes, there should be a lot of mechanisms that are put in place to ensure that our youths are becoming aware of our rights. They can't just sit down and say, me have a right, me have a right. I mean, no, say me have a right, but at the end of the day, they don't have anything put in place to actually allow them to learn about their rights. So for me, I would say at least implement a course in from like baby age.
Yeah, like
Civics,
ingrain it in the
Bring on
curriculum,
civics.
bring on
Yes, a
civics.
small, if you're growing up, go straight back up from, what age would you say? Around 8, starting at 8-year-old,
Yeah.
go straight back up. Because at that age, you'd most likely go through a lot of circumstances already. So you would have to be aware of some of those rights. For example, you've been going into the hospital as a little child. You have to realize that may have a right to see a doctor, may have a right to not be deprived and turned away simply because maybe we can't afford it. You have a public hospital and so many times these persons are there and you're there since morning, sick, sick as ever and can't get no doctor to treat them.
Mhm.
So they too need to learn from those issues that okay, we have a right, and when in case it's been infringed or breached, then I can find a method in which it can be enforced.
Mhm. And I think that again, a lot of responsibilities with rights. We mentioned earlier that there's a responsibility not to intervene or contravene any other person's rights, but then I guess this also gives us the responsibility to ensure that we're aware.
Yeah.
And so one way that you can be aware is going online. We have everything at our fingertips. You're using ChatGPT to do your homework and to do schoolwork, use ChatGPT to look up your rights. Use AI to help you go online and do an actual search. And there are a lot of websites, there are a lot of resources that are available to us that explain what our rights are, what they mean, how breaches of those rights look like, and what are the different avenues that we can explore to address these
So
breaches.
even outside of AI, because sometimes AI can be wrong and can be harmful to the
Girl,
environment
I
as
tell
well.
you.
But our government websites, JFJ websites, they have all the resources that you need to understand what your rights are, where you can go if you feel your right is being breached. And at JFJ, of course, you can always come here and talk to a member of JFJ about your suspicions around whether a right has been breached. So there are persons out there who can help.
Yes, we are. You can visit the JFJ website. You can visit the Instagram app as well. Reach out to somebody, do your research, and we have the JFJ numbers pasted almost everywhere on their website. So you can always reach out to them, call them, and speak to someone. I'm sure you can get assistance.
So there are many ways for you to access information about your rights and how to seek redress if your rights have been breached. And I think that's a good segue into our next conversation around accessing information, because that's another right that we have, but a lot of people aren't familiar with it. So stay tuned for our next episode where we look at accessing information. And I think that's it for today. We've had quite a fruitful conversation about knowing your rights. So now you should be empowered. You should feel empowered about protecting, acknowledging, and advocating for the protection of your rights. Thank you for tuning in to Just Tease Podcast.